we're officially a $2 billion market now, $2 billion over the 4 years. For New Mexico, that's amazing. Cannabis has provided really new opportunities that haven't had this type of economic opportunity in decades. Brand new industry. We rarely see this kind of economic activity in this state. So it's been a little bit of a boon to us to be able to have cannabis in New Mexico in a legal way. It's pretty neat.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cannabis Accounting Podcast. Today I have with me Amanda Metzler, the owner-operator of Bigsby Farms out in Oregon, and Matt Kennicott, the executive director of the Cannabis Association of New Mexico. I know you guys are involved in a few other things, so I'll kick it over to you guys to introduce yourselves and let the audience know who you are and what you've been on.
I will go ahead and start. Amanda Metzler, owner-operator of Bigsby Farms, like you said. In Oregon, I was one of the first licensed farms dating back to 2016. In addition to doing farming out here in production, I also founded Farms Inc., Oregon's cannabis farm advocates, to make sure the farmer had a seat at every single table, and more recently worked on merging those 4 trade associations in Oregon into one, where we are now the Cannabis Industry Alliance of Oregon. So one of the other things I did want to highlight before we move forward is at Bigsby Farms, we did install the largest solar installation on any farm in Oregon, not just a cannabis farm, to make us fully sustainable from seed to sale. Now we are not the largest. Some wineries have gone along and installed some solar, but it is great to see that sustainability is also moving through the industry. So Matt, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks. And thanks for having us on today. My name is Matt Kennicott. I'm the executive director of the Cannabis Association of New Mexico, also an owner-operator in Socorro, New Mexico, where we have a 6-acre farm called High Maintenance. We're a micro-licensee, so that means we can have 200 or fewer plants, which is perfect for a small living soil operation like ours. We're mainly outdoors. We've also got a small greenhouse, have a full market vegetable garden, chickens, and soon a little family of hogs. So we're expanding the homestead here. I've also been a consultant in the New Mexico market. When I was with my previous licensing firm, we licensed over a quarter of the entire state. I've been on probably 200 plus either full inspections with the Cannabis Control Division for compliance, or have conducted my own for clients all over the state. So it's been an interesting journey in cannabis so far.
Nice. So I like that perspective of owner-operator, but also heavily involved in the licensing side. So you just talked to a bunch of other owner-operators. Amanda, let's start with you, because I remember initially I found it an interesting transition. You were in California, Southern California, moved up to Oregon, and you went through some type of transition from, which is common in the cannabis industry. You're going to be a silent investor, somehow became owner-operator. So just walk us through a little bit of how that transition, what happened, what caused it, and then how it went.
So my husband and I were supposed to be silent investors on a farm in Oregon, or it was brought to us a proposition to invest in Oregon. This was around early 2015, right as legalization was taking place. When we started to discuss what we wanted to do, we automatically thought we would want to invest in a farm, because if you don't have raw product, you don't have anything. Why would you go to sales without the raw product? What we learned later on is that no matter what crop you farm, cannabis or corn, the farmer has always gone to the bottom. And the way that the industry has gone today is that the farmer is the last person to get paid. In year 1, we took our weed to the dispensary and sold it. We got cash on delivery and brought that back. And in year 2, it only took one farm to start giving their product to a wholesaler on consignment. If anyone's listening to this podcast, consignment is a loan at the end of the day. So the entire industry here in Oregon rests on the back of the farmer. We put all the money up front for the costs, and then we are the last person to see it back, if even at all. And so that has put a lot of strain. It put a lot of strain on our business. So what we ended up doing is consolidating down. And when I say we used to be silent investors and then we are now owner operators, as you can imagine in a new and emerging industry, when you're trying to take illegal to legal, there are lots of interesting characters. And what we learned early on is that if we wanted to protect our investment and be able to guide what was happening in something that was brand new, we needed to be on the ground. And so I ended up moving to Oregon kind of full time, while we also kept our spot back at Venice Beach. And then Eventually, my husband came out this way as well. And now we are full-time Oregonians, a driver's license and everything, and live here now. So what we had seen happen as we consolidated down because of the market suppression, we were growing indoor, outdoor, greenhouse, all around. And now we have one license where we focus on these beautiful high-tech kind of greenhouses, along with some outdoor production. And we have Bigsby Farms. It's named after the whammy bar on a guitar. We have music themed through our whole entire farm here. But we never really had an idea that we were going to start a brand. Our whole idea in the very beginning was to white label, grow the product, and move it through the supply chain. And we had to grow a brand and create a brand just to stay alive. 2017 and 2018. Raymond, like you were saying, where are we today? Is that we've gotten to that business model I wanted from the very beginning. It's taken us about a decade to get there, but we as a small kind of independent farm now, just run and owned by my husband and I, sell into a larger brand for products for them and for flowers. So it's a Starbucks bean model, I would say, where Starbucks doesn't grow all their beans. They source them from other farms. And it's something I've been saying through the entire industry is why continue to start new farms with all of the capital that takes if you're a larger operation? Utilize those smaller farms and infrastructure that's already built, and a lot of those kind of mom and pops that can funnel into those larger brands. And because Oregon's been around a little bit longer than what New Mexico is, that's what we've seen as the consolidation has taken place.
That's very interesting. Yeah. But that makes sense. I feel like we just got so used to, fully vertical integration, and in some markets it still makes sense. But as you get better at things, and if you can set up supply chains, like most supply chains are similar to some form of one person makes the raw ingredient, there's some type of manufacturing process that takes raw product into usually a finished good or some version that is going to be turned into a finished good, and then it gets sold at retail to either B2B or B2C. No, that makes sense that now you're transitioned along the way. It took a decade, so respect. I guess just first thing that came to my mind, being in business for a decade and moving up to Oregon, I guess just if there are some other new cannabis business owners, because there is every day. Like, we're in Minnesota right now, and they're opening up a lot of new doors. So if you could think back 10 years ago, what was some advice that you could give yourself when you were getting started that would help some of these operators in new markets such as Minnesota and even these emerging markets of New York, Maryland, Delaware, soon to be Pennsylvania and Florida as they go to adult use, and Wisconsin at some point? But what advice would you give your younger 10-year self starting out with Bigsby Farms?
Oh, I can give you a prime example. Is I even know better. Advocacy and trade associations are so important. It's what my background is, that I used to spend a decade in DC doing before I got involved in cannabis. And when I came, and left DC, I was like, I'm never doing that again. Sell all my seeds. It's challenging your rights to grow, and you get back involved in it. But the reason I was back involved in it is I didn't even pay attention to the cannabis trade associations. They weren't even really formed yet whatsoever. It didn't exist. But then rules and regulations would come, and I spent $40,000 putting up a beautiful wood cedar fence. And the next week, the rule changed to it only needed to be deer woven. And I said, I know better than this. I'm never going to be blindsided again by rules and regulations. And I would have, and then I guess that's probably why I started Farms Inc. as well, is that we really needed the farmer to have a seat at the table. We didn't want to get blindsided. The local jurisdictions were coming after us. So there was a need to organize around the challenging of the rights to grow. And so had I known that day one, I probably would have come in saying we're going to start the trade association, as opposed to the trial and errors and then bringing the trade association in. But I would also say to my 10-year self, don't be as hopeful for federal legalization, because I can promise you in 2015, I thought a decade later, we would have had federal legalization for sure.
I can appreciate that as well. I remember, back in 2015, I was in Denver, like looking at a grow, and like I could see the city skyline. I was like, we have made it. Like, we are so acceptable. We are not like in the middle of nowhere, upper Michigan, in some clandestine woodland setup. I'm like, a matter of time. And like, here we are like 11 years later, which is a good segue into kind of, Matt, if you could tell us a little bit. So we have an idea of Oregon. I appreciate Amanda kind of catching us up to speed on Bigsby Farms. I could nerd out all day on some of the unit economics and KPIs about it. But Matt, tell us a little bit about New Mexico, and then what was your goals with, obviously on the same mindset of trade association, setting up the Cannabis Association of New Mexico?
Yeah, New Mexico's been a wild ride the last 4 years, to be honest. I've been working in cannabis policy since 2007 when the Linen and Compassionate Use Act passed here. That was our medical bill. And actually, we were the first medical state in the country back in 1978. We had a tiny little program that covered two conditions. One was cancer. Forget the other one, but anyway, we've got a long tradition of cannabis in New Mexico. When I say it's been a wild ride, man, I think we did a lot of things right here in New Mexico, and we did some things not so right. It's been basically unlimited licenses and really not not a very big barrier to get one of our licenses. Starting to tighten down a little bit, but with that, you've seen really oversaturation in the market. We've got so much stinking flower on the market here. It's not even funny. In fact, we had a market analysis report basically released by our Cannabis Control Division late last year. Report said, yeah, everything's great in New Mexico. It's not great. The prices are good for the consumer, but our margins are razor thin here. And a big part of that is because of the number of licenses that we have and really an oversupply of certain product categories. We've got that happening. We've also got Border Patrol seizures happening, which we'll get into here a little bit later. And then we've got a Cannabis Control Division that has had tumultuous, to say the least, leadership over the last 4 years. We've had, I want to say, 3 or 4, I think it's been 4 directors in the last 4 years since the inception of the program. So there's been very little stability at the regulatory level as well. And we're seeing a lot of different things that are either going unenforced or have gone unenforced for a while, like our packaging standards, especially around child attractive. And we're seeing kind of an overcorrection now. So there's things that operators are not so sure about at this point. So all of that to be said, we're still making decent money here in New Mexico. We're officially a $2 billion market now, $2 billion over the 4 years. For New Mexico, that's amazing. Cannabis has provided really new opportunities for New Mexicans, especially that haven't had this type of economic opportunity in decades. Brand new industry. We rarely see this kind of economic activity in this state. So it's been a little bit of a boon to us to be able to have cannabis in New Mexico in a legal way. It's pretty neat.
No, very interesting. And it is a real economic thing that's happening. It's like we focus so much on brands and the end consumer, but I'm a numbers nerd, but I just kind of was thinking about this today, but like the economics of the cannabis industry, despite all of the headwinds, of which there are many and will probably be new ones, it is like an economic boon to a lot of areas. Like even in Michigan, like we saw this where it was just because there's just a lot of rural areas in Michigan where there's not a lot going on. They had Detroit, they had the logging industry, like they had a bit of a few boom bust type cities, but it's just so beautiful in the summertime in northern Michigan. So everybody still lives there. So cannabis has been a boon. I imagine it's similar to New Mexico. I'm just like stereotyping, but I just assume a lot of desert area everywhere. And so I'm like, all right, here's like,
Yeah, for sure.
it's like brand new. Like it didn't exist. Then they legalized, and now these products can totally be sold and taxed, and we can be employed.
Yeah.
Like companies get W-2 wages, pay taxes.
And one of the things we're seeing is like revitalization of certain areas too.
Okay.
Albuquerque had this giant warehouse district where most of the warehouses were empty. And now you see a large number of grows in that same area where they're moving the crime and other kind of bad elements out of the area. And you've got legit businesses there now. So it's bringing areas up. We've here in Socorro, my girlfriend and I have basically revitalized what was basically a dead farm. It was a horse farm and the soil was terrible. And we're not the only ones doing this either. All up and down the valley where we live, there's old farms that were inactive, but cannabis is starting to bring them new life and bring them back into real production. It's really cool to see.
No, it is for sure. Let's just touch on it real quick because you brought it up and it is interesting. So talk a bit about, we'll switch back to Oregon, but I want to talk about the border seizures in New Mexico. I find it interesting because again, like to some extent, if we're not on the advocacy side, live in a bubble of we're just focused on business, get the next business license, get into the next market. How much is it going to cost us? What do we have? Like, how are we going to get the money to do it? But there's still like there's tons of other weird things that are happening because it's federally illegal and creates just unique opportunities of just other organizations within the higher organizations of federal law and state law to just, I don't know, just operate in silos to an extent. So tell us a little bit about New Mexico. It does sound a little bit like it's out of a movie, but fill us in, Matt, on what's happening out there.
It's definitely out of a movie, man. And this is actually how Amanda and I met, was around the advocacy for the Border Patrol issue. Back in 2024, actually on Valentine's Day 2024, one of our southern operators had their first harvest stolen from them at a Border Patrol checkpoint. It was over $100,000 in flour. The driver was detained for about 6 hours, and that kind of kicked off a cascade of seizures at Border Patrol checkpoints around New Mexico over the course of the next 2 years, and really up to early this year. As a bit of background, the United States Border Patrol, under federal law, has the authority to set up temporary and permanent checkpoints up to 100 miles outside of the border. So in New Mexico, in several other states, California and Arizona included, there are permanent Border Patrol checkpoints at points all over the interstate system, as well as New Mexico has a little town called Radium Springs, probably less than 1,000 people, but there's a Border Patrol checkpoint set up there on one of the back roads. So they do quite a job of controlling the territory. Over the course of the last 2 years, we've had roughly, I want to say, about $1.25 million retail value of product and flour seized at these various Border Patrol checkpoints. That's just what we know about. I guarantee you there's been more, because people are afraid to come forward and report these seizures happening. Back in 2024, we formed a group of about 20 operators that had their products seized or were interested in the issue. From there, we ended up having about, I want to say it was 9 operators actually sue the federal government for their actions, because they've been seizing vehicles as well. They've also seized cash and checks. They've actually cashed checks in the bank or federal treasury up in, was like Wisconsin or something like that. So this issue has been costing operators a lot of extra time and a lot of extra money. Really, it looks like the solution lies within Border Patrol itself, where this is a political issue from what we've been able to gather. Looks like somebody doesn't like the governor's policies here in New Mexico, so they're making life a little hard for us operators. Unfortunately, we ended up losing the lawsuit. The judge dismissed it earlier this year, basically on the grounds of cannabis is still a Schedule I substance, so you have no standing here. That being said, we did look at other border states, including the northern border, and we've seen no operations similar to this. In fact, I believe it was in Vermont, they've had the opposite problem, where they actually filed a federal lawsuit saying, you're not equally enforcing the law because we know there's seizures going on in other places, but you're letting us go up here. So you really need to be enforcing it equally. So it's been an interesting ride. The latest seizure happened about 2 weeks ago, I believe at the I-25 North checkpoint, and it was another $100,000 in flour, just a giant loss. We had this loose group of operators that was working together, and at the time, I had a different organization that was more news and advocacy than actual trade group called The Plug, and we helped try to bring some of it together under that. But out of that grew the Cannabis Association of New Mexico, because we really needed a much stronger voice in Santa Fe, where our capital is, than we've had up to this point. So I think did I miss anything, Amanda?
I think that you hit that kind of perfectly. So the border issue is how Matt and I met. Higher Culture is actually an Oregon business that has expanded into New Mexico. I'm doing some in-house government affairs work for them, and the border was the number one issue because this company is located in the southern part of the state, so below the border. And while we hadn't had anything seized at the time that I got introduced to Matt as a company, it's a real threat. And the one thing, Raymond, I wanted to talk about here is what that threat of the border is doing to the businesses that are located in the South. So as we were growing the business and it was getting large across the state, there was always this threat of the border issue and it getting seized. And how much are you going to put in the car that you're willing to lose? And is it 30 grand that you're willing to lose? And then how many extra trips is that? And now you're compounding all of these transportation fees and you're actually transporting out of compliance, because now you're going through the border and then giving it to the transportation company. And that's not technically how it's supposed to work as well. So what we had to decide as a business is that we'll keep a few clients that are north of the border, but we focus the entire business now south of the border. And what that did is we had to change the entire business model, like what the staffing looks like, how large is it going to be, and are we just going to accept that this is what our growth can be and it can't get any larger because of the border issue? And that's what we had to decide to do. Like, they were first just seizing product, but then they started seizing cars. And then they started putting you on a list where you were a drug trafficker. And then they started doing all of these really insane things that as a business, we weren't willing to risk someone driving that through for us. We had our general manager doing the driving initially until she got stopped. And in that stop, she knew what was happening. And so she asked them questions like, why do you guys allow us to get a license and drive through here? And just asking them all the questions. And what she really found out was this is politically driven and they're doing it in New Mexico and nowhere else. And they also let her off with a warning. And then these other people are having cars seized. So there really is no rhyme or reason of what is happening down at the border issue. And that's the part that's scary. And when I was joking about like, how did they clearly got seized because they didn't package up their drugs, what you're having to do to move through checkpoints is act as if you're transporting illegal drugs, even though you are legally allowed to sell these in the state of New Mexico. Like, we have had to invest in vacuum sealers and alcohol wipe down everything and like all of these things that you shouldn't have to do as a legal business that just add dollars and money and money and money to the transportation costs into your business. So it is incredibly hindering. I've talked to a few lawyers in New Mexico and their response was, probably shouldn't have put your business down there. So there isn't the same kind of help that you would think would be happening for those seizures for cannabis companies that I would have assumed like from the state level.
Yeah. You would assume the state would do more to, protect the industries. It's kind of like the golden goose, like we pay taxes, they get tax revenue, they need tax revenue. But I don't know, just having lived in reality in the industry, it's like you don't really expect it, but it is, I don't know. So at some point you'd think they'd help out, but I don't know. That is wild. And just like the economics behind it, like cash flow, like a lot of cannabis companies are doing between 1 to 20 million in top line sales. So if you lose 100K, like depending on the size of them, like that's very detrimental to the cash flows for that month. That could be a whole month's sales. But that month, that year, it's very detrimental because profit margins are very thin in this industry and they are getting thinner. And so stuff like that hurts because like the 100K is like finished product. And so it has so much labor cost associated with it, not just the raw material, then overhead. So it's the most expensive thing for them to seize as opposed to just coming into your grow and cutting your plants down. But that's why it is important.
Don't jinx us.
Yeah. Sorry, Matt.
No,
I'm having flashbacks.
One of the times I was in New Mexico, I made it a point to drive through every one of these border checkpoints. I needed to feel what that was like, even without product, to eloquently speak about this. And it is really nerve-wracking to drive through a checkpoint as an American and have them ask if you're a citizen with a gun 100 miles from the border. And so that's even without any product. It is an interesting dynamic that is transpiring there in the southern part of the state for cannabis.
Wow, that's why we're talking about it, trying to bring a little bit more light to it. Because it even reminds me of getting pulled over in Wisconsin. Like, we don't have any medical or adult use. And, like, you don't have any product on you, but you're just still, oh, wait, do I have any cannabis in the car on my person? And you're like, you got to do a quick little, like, self-assessment. Your adrenaline spikes. Oh, no, I just was speeding again. All right. So I can only imagine when you're moving actual product, even though it's licensed and legal, it's still federally illegal. And everybody knows what's going on with seizures. So it's, for those who don't know, it's very emotionally taxing.
Yeah.
I digress. Switching gears a little bit back to Oregon, Amanda, let's talk about the solar panel and the energy side of the cannabis industry. I feel like we're both on the same tip of trying to save the planet, save the turtles. And so the cannabis industry, it's like, it is like we're doing good, but we also bringing products to market. And products require packaging. And I'm still trying to figure out how to separate the two, but it's got to come with a barcode on it to be sold in most legal channels. And with that in mind, tell me a little bit about the solar panel. Just how do you think through just the energy impact of these cannabis grows? Yours sounds like it's in greenhouse, a little bit of mixed door of in-house, but also some type of technology is taking energy. So what was your guys' business thesis and what made you guys want to invest in solar and go that route?
So we are located in Southern Oregon, which is the outdoor growing kind of capital around. You should be utilizing the sun. Like I just in general, like hands down. So when we were consolidating down, we used to do indoor and outdoor and greenhouse. We wanted to think, what could we do to offset? And it started at 50% of our electrical usage. And then we started investing and getting solar folks out here and everything else. And then we went, what could we do if we wanted it to be 100%? Like, how cool would that be? So what we ended up doing was shutting down our small indoor production. It was only a 2,400 square foot section in the middle of the barn. And then we found that unnecessary. And by removing that, and on our greenhouses, we just do 2 runs a year. We depth them, but we don't do any artificial lighting. So we utilize the sun. It has some propane heaters for when it's too cold that turn on and things of that, but we don't put any artificial lighting in there. We utilize what the environment is here in Southern Oregon. And then we also have a 30,000 square foot field outside that can be turned on for outdoor production as well. Because we are now growing for another company, I have worked out my renewal area to turn on and off my canopy size. So in Oregon, we grow based on canopy. In New Mexico, they do plant counts and they have to pay per that. So for us, it's canopy. So I only basically license for the year knowing what I'm going to be growing for that year. No longer do I have the business model days of growing all the weed and saying, will you buy my weed? And not knowing where it's going. We did that for way too long in an emerging industry, and we're not doing that anymore. So now we wait to grow for what we know is going to be purchased. And if that's a micro tier, which is only 2,000 square feet, or is it a tier 2, which is 40,000 square feet? We have the ability to move that up and down and only pay for what we're growing. And that electrical usage is from seed to sale. The way that it works for the solar panels, we did a $125,000 investment, and the solar panels, they are ground mount along with surface mount on the barn. And you can watch a little ticker on your phone as the sun is calculating how much you are bringing in real time at the same time. And so it has, while the market doesn't show that people want to pay extra for this or care about sustainability, we do know when markets open outside of Oregon that there will be a market for that. I always use myself as the consumer. That's the weed I would buy. And so there are additional people like me when we can start to open markets. Hence, I would have thought we had legalization after 10 years. And we'd be opening that market, or at least small farms, direct to consumer sales, like small wineries do, something that allows that craft, caring about the land, sustainability to still be part of the industry.
No, very cool. That is interesting. Wait, and I think that's just really brilliant business models. So the people who installed the solar panels or the business, they have a calculator that calculates how many hours or whatever the panels are absorbing sun. You're saving that on your energy bill based on average costs of energy in your area.
Yeah, how it works currently is that it feeds back directly into the grid, and then that amount that you have basically stored up, or the energy you created, gets a credit for your electrical bill. And if you don't use all of it for that month, it carries over and then resets in March. So we don't have our electrical bill is just the load fee and the taxes. It's less than $200 a month is what our electrical bill is, because of what the solar panels credits bring in, and the fact they let you roll it over month to cover the slower months. And then in the slower months, because we don't do any artificial lighting, we're not using that where there's less sun. And so the greenhouses are also set up to be really sustainable in the fact that they have temperature modules and humidity modules everywhere to see what it is. And then the fans and the shutters open and close and the speed based on what the humidity and the temperature is. So they can recycle out that air. They are 42 by 144 in size. They're about 6,000 square feet in under 30 seconds. And they don't have to continually run because they're set on an automated system where it's testing that. So it adds to the level of sustainability just for the technology part of the greenhouse.
How many people does it take to run that facility? They're that grow. Oh yeah, that's cool.
That's what we're doing. We of course have some additional help when it comes to harvest and planting, which are the 2 big main tasks that need to happen. Go ahead.
Go on.
We use a staffing agency that is strictly cannabis based for those 2 times. So he runs staffing cannabis for harvest and for planting and for trimming and the whole thing. Prior to that, there used to be a rule that farms couldn't transfer their product to each other unless they were under common ownership. And so for a small farm like me, we would have to have that larger farm we were selling into come and trim and do all of that here on site. This is what a trade association is for. Last year, we changed the rule legislatively where now farms are allowed to transfer to each other without common ownership. So that's going to allow people in my situation, along with other similar smaller operators now, to sell into larger farms who don't have a wholesale license for their joint line or their smokable flower or any of those. So what happened to me one year is when we didn't have that and I didn't sell it into just actual flour, I had to sell it to a processor, and it ended up being pennies on the dollar for what it was worth just because of like a rule hindrance. So getting that changed was really critical, and it's going to be critical for the smaller operators as well.
Nice. No, I appreciate you getting into the details because it's little just things like that where you're like, yeah, they need to be badged and licensed. And it's like the hiring is a little bit tougher. And because it is so like up and down with staffing, like you really need it for planting, harvesting, drying, curing, and like packaging, but you don't need them all year round. If you really have somebody that's with the plants every day, it's like they can take care of the defoliating and getting out there. Matt, man, I can nerd out on grow stuffs all day, but so outdoor grow and by two people. Matt, what is your setup down in New Mexico? I know you guys are on the plant count, 200 plants. How do you guys, is it outdoor, greenhouse?
I'm mainly growing us outdoor. We've got some beautiful living soil beds that we like to grow in. I've got a small 20 by 30 greenhouse. We mainly veg in there, and I'll do a bunch of our vegetable starts. So I've got a bunch of our vegetable starts in there as well. But we do 200, probably about 10 footers. Most of them are dumpers for rosin. So we'll do a little bit of flower sales, move a little bit rosin, and then the rest will get turned into joints or hash holes or something similar. And it's just the two of us. It's me and my girlfriend working. I'm actually on the farm more than she is because she's out wholesaling. Her side of our business is wholesale for us and about 15 other brands in New Mexico. So she's out hitting 80 to 100 dispensaries on a regular basis for the business. So it's mainly me working on our plants here, but I love it. It's a labor of love along with all of the other stuff we do on the farm because as anybody knows, you don't make a lot of money in cannabis necessarily. It's because you've got 6 other streams of income coming in.
Like a true farmer. Every single
yeah.
farmer, they're like, someone works outside of the house.
Yeah, exactly. Someone else has to help carry sometimes. So.
It's such a fascinating time in the industry because everybody's more the new markets. And yes, of course, they're going to be bigger companies and consolidation is happening. But my experience, and I believe it'll be this way for at least a couple more years, is it's a small to medium-sized business industry with companies doing anywhere from, we call it 0 to 1, 1 to 20. In top line sales, we're solving certain problems, taking companies from 0 to 1 million, getting it all set up, getting the capital raise, even like 1 to 3, and then 3 to 20 million. But by like operational business count, by absolute numbers, there's far more smaller companies than there are massive companies. And so I find it interesting. And I grew up on dairy farms, both sides of my family own dairy farms. And yeah, it was always the thing. It's like the dad worked on the farm. The mom was always doing some type of other side hustle, real estate, just working in other random places.
Yeah, exactly.
And we kind of talked about that before, Amanda, of just whether it's the coffee industry or some other industry, there's always the supply chain. It's like the farmers get the least amount of profit margin, product manufacturers get slightly more. Retailers get the largest product profit margin, more or less. And so it's this very unique time to be in the industry. But I'm with you. I think the consumers are a little bit more intuitive and selective than people give them credit for. And so I like to glass that full. Solar panel, energy sustainable type companies will be more and more the future. And I guess like on that note, like of the 125K, how long do you guys think it'll take before you pay it back? And then you are just essentially utility neutral every month.
We are. So I still get Cannabis Business Times conference about sustainability. And the biggest question was, how did you fund it? And we leveraged our own personal credit. A lot of people can't do that in business because they don't have it. And that is how we were able to do the $125,000 investment in the solar panels. I am going to very slowly pay that off because the interest rate on that is only 2.9%. And if we know what interest today for anything, that will be the last thing I ever pay off is going to be the solar panel cost because of that interest rate. So and we got a huge tax credit and tax break when we installed them as well. It was right at the end where things were starting to expire for those kind of solar credits. We also had a really amazing sales guy. He went to the owners of the company and said, we should give them smaller panels that are more efficient and add more of them. It'll be less labor and it'll offset. And we had a lot of moving pieces to make it work in this really fantastic way that it did. And then we got some front page articles in the local paper about it. So we really are trying to push this movement of sustainability. And it will, just like you said, Raymond, come back around. Right now, we are in a drive to the bottom, just like what it is in every state. But the consumer that wants to know where that's from, see what the farm looks like, see the flowers and the animals, and that there is the market for that. It's just not in Oregon.
Well, even the brand premium aside, just cash flows, we can control costs and expenses way more than we can control sales price. And so from my perspective, we can get utilities to pretty much be a net zero cost once everything nets out with the credits. That's a huge expense. I think of the operating costs for cultivation. It's usually almost always labor and utilities are usually 1 and 2. If you can that's a good use of capital. Let's invest $125K. We can get this monthly fee essentially down to zero. And every year we do that, we essentially increase our percentage profit on that investment. Very interesting. Okay. I want to be respectful of your guys' time here. So I know we could just talk through even just crap scale versus larger scale, but thinking through 2026 and a little bit more towards the future, what problems are you guys solving in 2026, either in Oregon or in New Mexico?
I could start with Oregon for sure because we're 10 years in now. And so what we are working on, not only as a trade association, but industry as a whole with our legislators and regulators and other stakeholders, is that we're calling it the reimagining. We need to sit down, and that's going to happen in 2 months, and start having conversations about what our rules and regulations look like. Is there a pathway where we should change it? Should we be licensing businesses and not properties? Should you be able to expand this way? Should your license be an asset and not just an issuance of a license? And what does social consumption look like in Oregon? How could we move that? So this is where we are now. We're having a 10-year reimagining, and we're going to see what comes out of it. What we'll be doing is the ideas that we want to push forward will be fleshed out through the policy committee and the trade association, and then be able to advocate for those as a larger industry as a whole. So we're having giant AR issues as well. These conversations will be coming here in Oregon, but we're having a big retrospective, I would say, and reimagining of cannabis in Oregon. And it will be public safety will be there, and the Oregon State Police and regulators and things of that sort. So we'll see what comes out of it.
No, that's very interesting. And it makes sense. It's 10 years is a good run. We figured a lot out. Other states have opened up. So for good, bad, or indifferent, sounds like, they're going through a kind of reassessment, so to speak. Matt, what about yourself down in New Mexico? Kind of what problems are you trying to solve in 2026?
The current big issue is packaging. During the 2026 legislative session, which concluded mid-February, we had a bill introduced, House Bill 294, that would have required, amongst other things, cannabis companies to switch to black and white packaging with a plain sans serif font. It was being introduced under the auspices of protecting children. So I said, if we're really worried about protecting children, let's take the industry lead on this. And I developed a campaign with one of our other board members from Farmers Quality Products here in New Mexico. Shout out to Don Romero and Jesh Booth, who is his creative director. We sat down, put together an entire public relations and public education campaign really over 3 days on a weekend, shot a couple of promo spots, put up a website, got posters done, and presented it in front of the legislature in each committee and said, this is the real way to make sure that kids are not getting access to cannabis. We agree, cannabis is an adult product. Only adults should be using it and have access to it, but there has to be some responsibility at home. And that's where it comes in educating parents and educators and other folks, instead of doing things like making us switch all of our packaging and branding from something that's very colorful or kind of respects the tradition of cannabis So we're definitely fighting that. We've got the campaign we're getting ready to launch here at the end of this month. We've got the Cannabis Control Division, New Mexico Poison Control Center, and New Mexico Department of Health all signed off on it. They're lending us their logos, potentially some funding down the road, health education language. And then I've gone out and found private donors. US Eagle, thank you so much for your donation. I've got Flow Hub that's working on a donation to us too to help get this program rolling and in our media market. Stash Logic's company, who was founded on protecting children with locking cannabis boxes, is donating a large number of those boxes to our campaign so we can give them out and put educational materials inside. In the meantime, I feel like we're a little bit at odds with the Cannabis Control Division on this too, because they've got their boss at the Regulation and Licensing Department, who's the superintendent of the department, who really he got his butt kicked during the legislative session. He's told us as much. Yeah, he's said it. And he's basically told us you were going to have 16 months to clean up your packaging through this legislation. Now you've got, referring to himself, now you've got a colorblind cowboy who's in charge and will be coming after you guys. All we've really been asking for months now has been standards. Tell us what you're actually basing child attractive on and how you're making these determinations instead of a group chat through text with your inspectors. Give us something. In a couple of weeks here, we're going to go sit down with CD and the Cannabis Control Division and the Regulation and Licensing Department as an industry. I've sent them some tools that we've developed. One is a checklist that their inspectors can use based on FDA guidance on intoxicating hemp, as well as from other states with child attractive packaging laws, and basically a decision tree or flow chart that we can use as operators to see if our products or packaging is child attractive or not. So that's a really big issue that we're working on this year. We've got water issues that we're working with the state engineer on. We're actually getting this close to having a solution to a water hauling problem that we had that actually shut down something like 42 small operators statewide in the last couple of years. But we should have a solution to that here end of April. We really need to have a conversation about the oversaturation in our market too, and the number of licenses that are out there. Right now, our businesses really aren't worth much. We cannot sell or transfer our licenses at all. And we we do have really open and unlimited licenses in New Mexico. So we need to talk about shutting some of that down, letting us get our legs under us as operators a little bit to bring a little bit more stability to the market and stop living on kind of this jello footing that we've been living on. We've got social consumption. We've got some awesome lounges. I'm actually going to one in Albuquerque later today. Really cool places that we've got, maybe expanding that a little bit to where we can do festivals and some really cool outdoor stuff. Inspections before opening is a huge one that we need to work on here. And numbers and cents wise, our cannabis excise tax is going to start killing retailers here starting in July. Our cannabis excise tax is probably the number one issue for the industry right now. The way our taxation works on retail, we've got the cannabis excise tax, which is currently 13% and rises by 1 percentage point every July until 2030. We also have a gross receipts tax in New Mexico. Super pyramided. Lowest rate is like 7.2%. The highest is over 9%. But when you're at the cannabis checkout, you're paying the excise tax plus the gross receipts. So in a lot of places, that's over that 21% magical number where consumers start going back to the traditional or illicit market to buy their product. So we are going to be making a full court press effort on that this year by meeting with legislators. In fact, I've got our first town hall happening in Chaparral, New Mexico with Representative Sarah Silva, who represents the area this Thursday night. We're going to do a series of town halls like that, talking about issues with just cannabis businesses and their elected officials. We're also going to be in front of interim committees of the legislature all summer long, talking about these big issues. And then next legislative session, hopefully amongst other priorities, we'll have the excise tax bill introduced to not only pause it, but really roll it back a couple of percentage points. July 1st, it goes up to 14%. And in talking with retailers, especially in Albuquerque, they're telling me they're going to have to find 40 new customers a month just to maintain their current margins as the excise tax increases. So that's a heavy lift. It's a very heavy lift for a limited consumer market that's very value driven in Albuquerque, but also is one of the most oversaturated markets in the state. Those are some of the things we're working on. We're pulling together a policy committee so we can really put our arms around the full thing, and that'll happen here starting in the next month or so.
Nice. No, sounds like you have your arms full.
Yeah.
No shortage of things that need to get done in the cannabis industry. And I don't know, it's always evolving. Who pays the tax? The consumer, the supplier, the vendor. It always is evolving. And it is a unique thing of states where kind of like unlimited license, grow as much as you can, try and sell it, shoot from the hip, figure it out versus Amanda's way, which is the CFO. I love your way much more. This is how normal business is done, actually. Like normally finance tells the sales team how much to sell because I need the cash to make it happen. And so it's like, I can only get X amount of capital, working capital, we call this. So you can only sell this much because it's going to cost this much, 500K just to even hit the sales number. And we need to spread that out over time. Whereas like cannabis, it's such a new industry. Like they're getting to that point. Like Amanda, you said lovingly is like, it was lovely. It took 10 years, but now we're to the point where like, I just get a license based on how much I've like sold, which is also based on how much capital I want to tie up into this business for the next year. Because I could just go take that same capital and put it on the S&P 500 and get my 10% and have way less headaches.
Yeah.
So like it has to be more than that if I'm going to tie up 500K to $1 million to millions or tens of millions of dollars into these grows. So yeah, which is all supply chain driven and relationships driven. And yeah, we're still evolving. So again, just respect to both of you for being on the kind of cultivation side, owner operators. So the industry is nothing happens without the initial cultivation part of the supply chain. No, very interesting. Thanks again for your time. Emails and everything will be inside in the show notes. But I guess just if anybody's going to be at any events or speaking or trade show associations, where can people physically see you throughout 2026?
Good question. I'll be all over I'll be all over New Mexico. We do live stream our monthly meetings on YouTube. On our channel there is at Canna NM. It's the first Wednesday of every month. So we'll be streaming there. I actually applied for a speaking role at MJ BizCon this year. So fingers crossed. We really want to make it a presentation about how you take bad policy, which is our packaging policy, and turn it into something good, which is an industry-driven effort. Other than that, I'm on podcasts all over the state of New Mexico. You can find us on Instagram at NM_cannabis2.
Awesome.
For Oregon, the Trade Association's acronym is CHOW, the Cannabis Industry Alliance of Oregon. And we are kicking off a roadshow starting May 13th in Bend. And then we'll be going to Eugene and also Southern Oregon to spread that out along the state and talk about what's happening as well, especially down here in Southern Oregon where all the farmers are. We will be hosting it in September, right before harvest and not during planting. That's what we'll be doing this year. And we do our monthly member meeting. We are switching to quarterly instead of monthly, but those happen in Portland, and we also showcase those online for our members.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You guys have a good day. Talk to you later.
Thank you.